Nice to see everybody here. My name is Mikey Mhenna. I'm going to be hosting today's chat with Bahia. I am excited to introduce our special guest. Bahia Shehab is a multidisciplinary artist, designer, art historian, and professor of design and founder of the graphic design program at the American University of Cairo. Her artwork has been displayed globally, and it was the subject of the 2015 documentary film Nefertiti's Daughters. Her work has received a number of international recognitions and awards, some of which include the BBC 100 Women's List, TED Senior Fellowship, and Prince Claus Award. Bahia is the first Arab woman to receive the UNESCO Sharjah Prize for Arab Culture. Her publications include 1,000 Times No, The Visual History of Lam Alif, At the Corner of a Dream, A History of Arab Graphic Design, and You Can Crush the Flowers, a visual memoir of the Egyptian Revolution. Bahia, welcome to Afikra Conversations.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you here. It's really, really exciting. So I want to start with a question related to your bio, okay? The fifth word of your bio is artist. It's the first noun in your bio. It's the first thing that you describe yourself as. However, I was listening to an interview or reading an interview that you gave, and you harken back to the younger Bahia saying, when I was young, I was trying hard not to become an artist. What were you trying to become, and why were you not wanting to become an artist?
I think growing up in a art is really considered class citizen. When you're living through a war, or when you're living through a community that is trying hard to survive, art becomes a luxury. So it felt kind of selfish to say I want to be an artist. Yeah, when everybody wants their kids to be doctors and engineers, and then you come and say, oh, I want to be an artist. It's not easy. We really don't have an infrastructure for that, or the importance of art is not highlighted in our educational systems, or the meaning of art, or the value of art, or the impact of art. So having grown up in the region, it was hard coming to terms with the fact that I'm an artist.
Did you grow up between Lebanon and Egypt?
No, I grew up mainly during the war in Lebanon. So
okay.
My growing up years are memories of the war in Lebanon.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of speaks to this idea of art maybe feeling like it's non-contributory, right? This idea that, I got to do something useful, and art might not be useful. So what did you initially study? What did you force yourself to do to begin with?
I studied design because in my mind I thought, design, you get to use your artistic skills, but you're contributing in a way. You work with different entities, you solve problems. So I felt at the time it was maybe more useful to my community if I were a designer than if I became an artist.
So I was going to save this for later, but we sort of happened upon this already. So you went to the American University of Beirut. You studied graphic design at what is now a famed graphic design program. But when you graduated, it was new. It was a new program. I have two questions. One, what do you think you would have done had that program not existed? And what was it like to be there in the 90s? When it was a brand new program? Was there excitement around it? Was it clear that there was kind of history being made?
Not really. It was nerve-wracking.
So that's still the same then.
Yeah, we were the fourth class to graduate. We had no idea what to expect. Nobody understood what we do. I don't think we understood what we're going to do. And but you could feel the excitement of our teachers, one of which is here with us tonight, Huda Abi Faris. Hi Huda, I love you. So our teachers coming to post-war Lebanon, I think they felt that they are doing something important. And I think their energy and their dedication came across, even if we were not aware of it growing up or being I graduated in the late 90s, so mid 90s to late 90s. It was a very strange and interesting time.
Yeah, those teachers and professors and mentors, including Huda, who was on the program last week, they're heroes. So I want to jump ahead. So in the bio also, it said that you started the program, or you helped start or started the program at AUC, 20 years later or so. What's different in the conception of that program with 20 years of waves crashing against the Arab graphic design sands, so to speak? What's different? Why does the program need to be different?
Yeah, so during 10 years ago, when I was developing and building the program, I was looking at programs in the region, and it struck me the fact that we don't have any history courses about design. Yeah. So I introduced 3 courses that one of which is the history of Arab graphic design. And I knew that I had no textbook, I had no content, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just slid it into the syllabi and into the course list, and it went through the Senate, nobody noticed. And that course sat there in the catalog for like 5-6 years without us being able to offer it because we had no content. But I really wanted to, yeah. So before that, in the history of Arabic calligraphy and the history of advertising in the region. So the history of advertising in the region, I was able to offer it and teach it, and now it's being taught by one of our brilliant instructors without a textbook yet. But the history of Arab graphic design was more challenging. It was not easy to access that data. So we had to wait till the book was out so that we were able to offer the course.
That's so cool. Oh, we're actually doing a session about the history of the advertising industry in the region next year. So I need to connect with this person. Okay, so let's move forward. So you're at AUC, you're willing this course into existence, right? And you connect with your collaborator, who is a fellow professor, Haytham Nawar, sorry. And you both realize we have the same books on the shelves, we have the same references, we're the same type of history nerds, but this doesn't exist. When do you decide to say we need to actually write this down, and how do you begin to approach the methodology of writing this book as a history book?
Yeah, first we needed to collect data, and this was the most time-consuming part of actually not the most time-consuming, but a very time-consuming process, collecting the data. So we started by reaching out to the well-known designers and asking them what was it like doing oral history recordings with them and digging out for more and more names. So that was the first step. We compiled a list of names of living and deceased designers, and we placed them chronologically, trying to place them within their historic context. Yeah. And then we started the data collection on these artists, and designers. If they're alive, we would reach out to them. If they're not, we would reach out to family members or archives or colleagues who would have their work. And this was the days, and then the decision making of who to include and not to include, which was really a grueling process. Really, we always mention this, that this is barely 15, 20, 25% of the data we have collected. Not more. And we couldn't include, we have thousands upon thousands of photos, and we really needed to select what's really crucial to the narrative that we're working with. And then the writing, and then the editing, and then the design. So.
Yeah, so, before the call, I will out myself. Before the call, I said to you, Bahia, I'm amazed that you wrote a history book. The word history is in the title, and it's a history book. It's a proper history book, but you're not a historian. How did you approach this? And then you said, I am a historian, which I didn't realize.
Yes, by practice, yes, I studied with the brilliant teachers at the American University in Cairo for my master's, and then for my PhD, I studied at Leiden. So I am a historian.
Yeah, so I want to actually like talk about the semantics of that, because I don't think I fully understand it. What makes this, what qualifies this as a rigorous history book about this region, versus sort of like a list of designers and trends and stuff like that?
Yeah, because the difference is we did not write a list of designers and just a listing of their work. We actually linked their work to what was going on historically for them. So what was the technology that was taking place at the time? What was the political atmosphere like? What was the social context of their work? Why were they developing this work? What was going on at their time? Who were they friends with? What kind of collectives were being formed at different times of history? So this is what really makes it a textbook, something that you can, place at any university and disseminate this kind of knowledge, because you contextualize the work of these designers. It's not existing in a bubble or in a white cube.
Yeah. So for those who can't see the screen, the structure of the book is broken up into decades, essentially. Sometimes there are 20-year stretches, but largely decade by decade. I'm curious, what about the book actually surprised you in terms of the themes, the clusters? Like, for example, there's 1960 to 1969 Arab design and the Palestinian resistance, followed by Arab designers in exile. I'm curious, by the end of the, if I were speaking to Bahia at the beginning of this project versus at the end, did you have a different sketch for the overall arc? Did something surprise you through the oral histories where you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize what was happening in Morocco at the time. I don't know, I didn't know what was happening in Sudan at the time. I didn't know this stuff.
Yeah, actually, to mention Sudan, they had one of the earliest design schools in the mid-70s, and they had a typography design program, something that we think is like new. And we're in the 90s. Maybe it started in Beirut, but it started in Sudan from the 70s, and this is like one big piece of knowledge that was interesting to find. There were quite a few surprises here and there, but overall, we did kind of stick to this chronological structure that we developed. The surprises were minor, but the overall narrative remained the same, more or less.
So I want to talk a little bit about two things. One is that I think one of the things that the book does well is it sort of expands the phrase graphic design beyond Photoshop, right? Beyond Illustrator, right? Beyond that stuff, and says there is a broader historical tradition that this discipline is tied to, and so you go not out of your way, but both you and Haytham make a point to actually connect to the historical tradition. I'm curious, when you teach students, do they fully is that something that sort of surprises them, or do they not consider these images that we see on the screen as graphic design to begin with?
No, of course, but for example, they wouldn't think of street signage. They wouldn't think of, for example, Yom Said, which is a film title. So they wouldn't link these diverse expressions of design as design. They think that street signage is one thing and the cinema is another, and advertising is a third, and then maybe graphic design is making logos only or book covers. Yeah. So it's nice to see them understand the spectrum of what design is.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing that you said that I really loved was you said it was important for us to put a face to the name, and that students don't just read about history in general and design in general. We wanted to personalize it so that they feel they have grandmothers and grandfathers in design who they can look up to. So I'm going to be walking through some of these grandfathers and grandmothers on the slides, but as I'm putting them up, were there names that you were completely unaware of?
Of course.
And that you realized that you were referencing in your own work because the shadow of their work was cast so long, and then you're like, I had no idea this person exists, but I love their work. I know their work.
Yes, it's true. It's a lot of them were really unknown to me. I knew a few famous, the most well-known names, but the rest were all really amazing discoveries, like Burhan Karkutli, who I love and I adore his work, but reading his story, writing about him, seeing how committed he was to the Palestinian resistance. Muhyiddin al-Labad, the same, how concerned he was. So, and the sad stories, like for example, Kamil al-Baba, who we could not find his design work, but we knew that he was important, but there was no archive of his actual design work. You had his calligraphic work, which they considered to be more important, but not. So we don't have much of a lot of documentation. I feel like these are a series. This book contains a series of untold stories. So I'm hoping we encourage other historians and other academics to just pick it up and continue. This is simply the tip of the iceberg. So each of them is a story, is a book on their own. And I think what the Khat Foundation is already demonstrating that by creating this series of books that we are so grateful that we have on our bookshelves now. Thank you for that again. So, but someone like Muhammad Hijri, who wrote this fascinating book, Shimal Yamin, and it's full of, it's a bound book. So if anybody has it, this is really precious. The first time I saw it was actually in Morocco, because he printed it when he was working in Tunisia. And it's so graphic, and it's all on his Facebook page. If you go to his Facebook page, you'll find the whole book published there. It's so beautiful. It's so strong and graphic. And he takes poetry from the left, from all over the Arab world, and he pairs them with these really amazingly graphic, vulgar images that are fascinating. And the story of Muhammad Saeed al-Saggar from Iraq, who lived all his life fighting of Arabic script, and then lived in exile and died in France at 80 years old, and wrote this beautiful book about his journey and his story. So each of them is a story on their own.
Amazing. I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions about the book. I'm going to move on just for time to talk about another one of your projects, which I have to be thankful that you sent me a copy of this. So I've been really, I love that you did that. Okay, so the title, I'll read the title again. You Can Crush the Flower is a visual memoir of the Egyptian Revolution. Again, the title is correct. It's a memoir. I didn't think that this was going to be a memoir. I thought, because when you and I spoke on the phone to begin with, I thought you were going to send me a book about, kind of a dry book about street culture and street art during the revolution, documenting it. But this is documenting the walls of your heart and the walls of your brain more than it's documenting the walls of Egypt and the corollary between, like, superimposed on top of each other. So maybe you can tell everybody the conceit of the book, and how did it become conceptualized into a book as opposed to just a journal for yourself?
Well, actually, it's a trick. It's a bit of a trick there, because I didn't really want to write a memoir, but I wanted to write a history from below. So a grassroots kind of history, because as a historian, you take data, you collect research, you analyze it, you represent it. It's a completely different way of engaging with the material. And I'm sure there are a lot of history books on the revolution, and we will write more. I just wanted to document the story from the eyes of maybe a naive artist who is living in Cairo and seeing things unfold. I just wanted to humanize the narrative more and make it more accessible to a greater audience in a way. So it is a memoir, but it's really based on hard facts, because I was working what we call now the digital humanities. I was archiving everything that was screenshotting. I have thousands of screenshots of posts and tweets and Facebook posts that were unfolding during the revolution. And I used those to build a historic structure. And then I used my personal photo archive to build the personal narrative. And then combining these two, we came up with the book.
Yeah. So the first, let me actually sort of try to intertwine. The first thing, the first introduction to your work was the word no, right? That is the first way I became introduced to you. This idea that, you know, a thousand times no. And these interpretations and excavations of how this word can actually look and all these different uses of it throughout Islamic history. But I'd love to be able to talk about when you decided to start stenciling this all over the streets of Cairo.
Yeah, it was actually, I still remember that it was November of 2011, nine months into the revolution. And there was this video of corpses. I had been, as I told you, documenting aggressively, thinking that this is historic and I'm going to be playing historian and documenting and writing about it from a historic perspective. But after you're exposed to all that data, it becomes really unbearable to, you feel responsible and you feel, you see all these young men and women dying on the streets and their eyes shot. And so it became unbearable, honestly, to just sit down and pretend that I can just be a historian. And, you know, sometimes you see history unfolding and you can choose to be a spectator or you want to be part of it. And with the 1,000 times no, it was my way of saying, I want to, something big is happening and I really need to say something. I cannot just document. It's not enough.
Yeah. And somehow it seems as though you did both quite effectively, which is a really, really hard song to play.
I hope so. I think time will tell.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there at the time, and it was a really effective way of retelling this. So I want to talk a little bit about, maybe I'll go back to the table of contents, about the visual evolution that you noticed on the streets. Again, for those who can't see the screen, the way the table of contents is set up, even as a memoir, is chronological and has dates associated with each chapter. And you're describing in them the visuals that you would start seeing on the walls. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
It started, as I said, with the documentation, and I was really drawn to street art and street artists. And some of them, I mean, their work spoke to me, and I felt like I wanted to contribute the same way they were contributing, and that only happened 9 months later. Some of them are very, very close friends now, 10 years after the revolution. We felt the most exciting part is the conversations we were having with each other on the street without knowing each other. So there would be an event, a shooting or the massacre or, you know, any event. And we'd all go down to the street to spray a similar comment about the event, but in different styles and in different ways and in different comments. There's one part in the book where I mentioned the work of Ammar Abu Bakr. I think it's next slide maybe, or the one before. Can you go down a bit? In this one, yeah. So you see her, the painting of the martyr, a woman who's holding a small picture. Mm-hmm. She's the mother of the martyrs. And that night, it was the night when we knew that the revolution will not survive because there was a Muslim Brotherhood candidate and a military candidate, and these were the final options. So I wanted to paint No to a New Pharaoh, so I created that stencil, and I was ready to go down and paint it. I waited till 4 a.m. When I went to this wall, which is the Mohammed Mahmoud wall on the AUC campus, wall, where Ammar had painted these beautiful paintings of the martyrs on the picture on top. And on that night, when I wanted to spray No to a New Pharaoh, I came and I found that he vandalized his own work. Even though he had these gorgeous paintings of martyrs, he painted this huge calligraphic black band over his work, saying, "Insa اللي فات وخليك بالانتخابات." So forget what happened and just focus with the elections, which we thought was bullshit. And he painted the paintings of these mothers of the martyrs who are still alive. I sat and I cried at 4 a.m. for like 30 minutes in front of his artwork because he was faster than me and he said it more poetically. And I felt so connected to him creatively that you feel like you're part of a community, even if we don't know each other's names and faces. And that was really special. And I think it's undescribable. I feel so privileged that I had the honor of living through something like that.
Yeah. I'm really curious about, we can talk about this later, about the transnationalism of these images, and how much are they, do you see similarities between, for example, what was happening in Lebanon 2 years ago, and images that would be cropping up on walls there? As somebody who's connected to both places, are there similar images that are the same way you are in conversation with people you haven't met? Are these artists in conversation across borders?
Yes, definitely. And not just in Lebanon, but also in Sudan, in Tunis, in the revolutions. I mean, with the internet, we're very lucky now that the learnings are faster, that countries are looking at each other's as case studies, and there's a learning curve. So we saw what happened in Sudan, and there was a lot of activists in Egypt who were providing knowledge and learnings of how we failed and how they can succeed. So there is this organic support of also in Beirut, pictures of political prisoners in Cairo were being painted and held in public squares in Beirut. So we see this, and there's so many patterns in the revolutions. It's not a single, so there's this collective celebration, people coming together. There is this defiance of authority. And this is all documented with pictures, and it's always going viral. And then it is reflected on the walls by different artists. So there's definitely patterns.
As a historian, how the previous book ends at 2000, right? The history book, it ends at the year 2000, which is, the internet just started, but this is pre-social media, and it's definitely pre the advent of where we are now with social media really dominating our lives. So the walls that people post on and stencil on aren't physical walls, right? The most important real estate is not physical. How are you thinking about documenting this and creating a history of sorts for the artwork that's going up? How can, just like, you may not have an answer, but I'm curious because you're probably the best person I can ask about this.
So I think in my case, I out in a TED Talk as a street artist supporting the revolution. And to me, that is a social media and the similar platforms like yours are great places to document stories that are ephemeral. So one platform is these conversations that we can have digitally, and that are stored somewhere on servers that are not controlled by our regimes. The second way is books, and this is why I've published these two books on street art, because none of my street art is there anymore in Cairo. So, but then where we come again to the concept of public and what is public art right now. Yeah. And you've raised a very important point, is that the physicality of the wall is no longer important. My work has been erased all over Cairo, but the stories that lived, simply because I was able to document them with a photo on a website or in a book. And I'm still here sitting with you and talking about ideas that were erased and demolished by the regime. But we have managed to keep them alive by these conversations that we're having today.
If you were to give yourself some advice, the Bahia sort of at the beginning of this moment when you first started writing, what did the January 25th Bahia not fully understand, that if you were to give that person advice on her practice and the way she was writing and the way she was documenting and the way she was even thinking, what advice would you now, with hindsight, give her?
I don't know. I think we need the different phases in our life because they lead us to the next aha moment. I don't think I find beauty in naivety, and I wouldn't want to change that because it's this kind of like the unknowing mind that is curious enough to ask very simple questions that lead to the bigger answers. So I would just ask her to worry less. That's all.
I have two more questions, and then I want to open it up to the chat. The first one is, how soon into the book were you sure that this was going to be the title? Like, was there another option in your head? Because this is
no,
so
it's
deeply
from chapter 1. It was,
yeah, because this poem, or this quote, is referencing Pablo Neruda, and it is simultaneously optimistic and pessimistic, sad and happy at the same time, which is your book, right? It's this beautiful artistic expressions of freedom and of hope and defiance, but these walls get torn down. So I'm curious, yeah. So you knew that this was going to be the title from the very beginning?
Yes, from day one. Yes, of course.
Okay, let's go to the quick Q&A, and then we will open it up to the audience. I clearly had a lot more slides that I wanted to get to, but you have so much cool work, I can't get through all of them. Okay, let's open it up. Ready? So the first one is, what are you reading or watching right now?
Actually, the last thing I read is a really beautiful book by Iman Mirsel, who I'm very happy to know that she just won an award for her beautiful writing. It's part of a series called Kayfata, and she wrote this amazing book about motherhood. And if you have not read any book from that series, please read Iman Mirsel's عن الأمومة, because she answered so many questions that many of us as mothers or non-mothers have, and the psychology and the questions and what society expects of us as mothers versus what is really at play. So I highly recommend that book.
Amazing. Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
I have a confession. I grew up with no idols, actually, Mickey. It's a problem. I grew up with, this is what's very sad, that this is why I'm pushing more for more women on the forefront and women for women, because as a young woman, I had nobody to look up to really and say, their work is amazing and I want to like follow them. There wasn't, maybe Shagar al-Dur because she ruled Egypt and was the first female Khalifa of the Arab world, and then the Abbasids sent them a message and told them, if you don't have a man to rule you, we can send you one. But I mean, she would have been somebody I would have liked to shadow for a day.
Okay, ding, ding, ding. That sounds good. Okay, what do people most misunderstand about your work?
I don't think misunderstand. No, it's about me more than my work. They always have to know whether I'm Lebanese or Egyptian or where I'm from. And I have a problem with the issue of identity to start with. And these like colonial borders that are drawn for us, like little maps, you know, you belong here, you're called Lebanese, and now you're going to have this passport, you're not going to go anywhere with it. So I think I think in my region is just the concept of being a global citizen and not confirming to a specific national identity, and having a problem with that already is a big part of what people understand about my work, is where is it coming from. And I would like it to come from, to say that it comes from my heritage and my humanity and not my national identity.
Yeah, not paperwork. Okay, whose work do you admire or are inspired by? Again, there's a long list, I'm sure.
No, it's the Islamic, the unknown Islamic artists and artisans who build these gorgeous mosques and gorgeous madrasas all over the Arab and Islamic world. And who are unknown. And this is what's fascinating, is that it was not about them, it was about us and the collective, and living with beauty. How everything around us was beautiful. The cup we drank from, if you go to any Islamic museum, just look at what they wore and how they lived, they went about their life. These are my heroes, really. They inspire my work all the time.
I remember my question, and I'll ask it right before we open it up. You are, in some ways, I feel like you're a contradiction, Bahia, because your work is loud. Your work is rebellious, right? But you describe yourself as a quiet person, and the first sentence of this book is, "I am not a rebel." Do you notice that contradiction?
Yeah, but
Not at all.
it's also a reflection of the age, right? We are all full of contradictions, I think. We are all, and this is what makes us human.
Okay, great. Accepted answer. Okay, Rasha, you're up first.
Cool. Thank you. This was really fascinating stuff. I guess my question was, you talked a little bit about, the challenge of having to collect. I guess I was referring to the first book you guys talked about, which was the history of Arab graphic design. Is other than kind of finding and locating all that content, what did you find kind of most challenging about that process, and I guess bringing the book to print? Anything as well?
Yes, thank you for that question. Many challenges. Finding the data was a big challenge, is one of the biggest challenge, because it's not readily available. It's not like you walk into an archive and, hey, everything's there and let's write a book. You have to go visit. I had to go into Syria during the wars, through Lebanon, take a car and go through checkpoints and see the guy paying each checkpoint a different kind of cigarette pack, and get to Damascus. And I could meet the artists there, because their work was literally getting burnt. And I really felt like I was racing with time. And one of them, Ahmed Al-Mahalla, actually, he sent me a picture of his burnt studio. He told me, all my work is gone. And I think the book came about because Haitham and myself, we had this sense of urgency that this knowledge was disappearing and we really needed to capture it. So I would put collecting the data as the most challenging part of this process.
And thanks so much, Rasha. Okay, Daphne, you're up next.
Thank you so much for your inspiring words. I would love to know, what is your favorite laugh, or what is the most important laugh in your work?
It's the one that I haven't drawn yet.
Ooh. But it's in your mind already?
I love all the 1,000 no's, because together they're a confirmation of rejection of things we think are wrong in the world. And I think each of us should have a favorite 1,000 no's that they can use whenever they need to.
True. Good advice. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
What a good answer. Okay, Leila asked me to read her question. She said, what's new? What's your latest project?
Yes. Okay, so in terms of writing, I'm currently working with Huda on a new book for a new designer. So this is coming up soon. I really would love to write a book on the women designers, and this is something that has been coming up over, because now that we found the designers, I'm wondering, where are the women? So I would really love to explore that. And I'm also working on a 56 screen installation that is going to be launching this summer in Qatar. It's I don't want to burn it, but it's about persuasion, and it's a very difficult question that I think I managed to answer nicely. So this is coming in August.
Amazing. And if I get this right, of the 80 designers that you covered in the book, in the history book, only 3 of them or 4 of them, 5 of them were women?
Yeah.
So this book needs to happen.
Very soon, I promise.
Okay. Amin, you're up next.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bahia, for your fantastic work. I wanted to know how you would be describing the current scene of, Arab graphic design.
I think the reason why we stopped at 2000, because so much has happened in the past 20 years, it deserves like 2 more books just about it. I think the generation who grew up and studied design with the internet at hand, they're very skilled at documenting, presenting their work, because you had new platforms that were offering services that did not exist when I was growing up as a designer, like Behance, like even Instagram, and so this accessibility to the technology of digital archiving did not exist during my time, or when I was growing up and studying to be a designer, and the time of those who came before me. So I think it's really thriving. It's amazing what's going on. There is so much to explore and write about. And this is why we stopped at the year 2000, because we did not feel it was fair for us to cram so much talent and so much creativity in the last chapter of the book. It just didn't make sense. So I hope someone will write more books about more contemporary designers.
Amazing. Great question, I mean. Okay, next is, the question was, what is the first known advertisement from the Arab world and what was it for? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, because this is one of the next books I'm working on. So,
Bahia, stop messing around and write all of them at the same time.
Actually, I'm looking at the archive of the Ahram newspaper, which started, I think, in 1901 or 1898 something, very early on. I don't have the exact date. And some of the earliest ads are so amazing and cute. It's unbelievable. The ones I can remember right now, there were for medicine, there were ads for automobiles later on. That's not that early. I'm trying to remember what's the earliest. I wish I had my archive now. I would have been able to answer that question better. But if you go to the Ahram archive, which is one of the earliest newspapers in the Arab world, they have a full archive of their publications, and they do have some of the earliest ad examples in the Arab world.
Awesome. Samar, you're up next.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I wasn't keeping track of the order. Hi, Bahia.
Hi, Samura.
How are you?
I'm very good. It's so good to see you.
I know this is the first day of sun in London. Yay. So, yeah, thank you. Celebrations. My question was really about how was your work really received by institutions that are expected to provide. Actually, thank you so much for this book. When I found out about it, it was amazing. I have it. I got I'm gonna read it a few times. So because it's kind of really covers the gaps in our education, really. But yeah, how was it received? Were you asked to send copies? I don't know, to the UAE, to Beirut, to.
Actually, what we made a very important point is to send thank you copies to some of the designers. So we sent to the living ones. So I think we sent out around 45 copies to designers in different parts of the world. So this was the first step of disseminating the book. But then I am really surprised at how well it is received. It's we knew it was needed, but we did not imagine this overwhelming wave of interest. We already have 5 or 6 universities around the world who said it is included in their curriculum and in their syllabi, and it's being taught at their universities. So it's been really humbling.
So it lives in libraries now across design departments. Yeah, so I wanted to know. Great. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, I think we have time for a few more. Rumi.
Hi, Bahia. How are you? This is Rumi from Bangladesh, a bit far away from the Middle East region. But what my question was actually, Bahia, this concept, of actually, bringing in ancient practices like designs and motifs. So for example, a friend of mine was working on this product which is called the fabric in India called khadi, and she fused it with the like African motifs from the Zulu tribe, or it was Eritrea or something like that, where you get a cross fusion. And I was just thinking, because I mean, you know, this for your thoughts, and you know, because you've done work, and like if you present a culture and if you have certain things as a print on the fabric itself, right, which gives you that feeling of togetherness with that culture, is this kind of a trend which has potential, you think? Because it's a beautiful way to fuse things, you know, graffiti is one, but then, you know, you wear your clothes, but it has a sort of expression which is really not on your face, but when you wear it, it kind of, it's like tea, you know, it simmers. And I think there is a great potential of this moving forward, because we are trying to connect now, you know, and trying to break the barriers of all these cultural disconnects or misconceptions we have. And I just wanted to get your feel, because you do such beautiful work. And I was just thinking, because I'm interested in that. I'm not in that, I mean, I'm not in that industry itself, but I love to know if there is, you know, things along those lines. Is there? Great. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, we are developing a fashion major in Cairo, because I hear you. It's important. We move. Fabric and dress is the most intimate expression of identity, and I think whether fusion or looking at culture and being inspired is a very powerful way. I mean, look at, we're all wearing, not me, but everybody in the world wears jeans, yeah? And this is really the ultimate. And to me, I consciously decided to stop wearing jeans, because to me, it was a symbol of maybe colonization of dress. I didn't want to feel like I'm wearing the dress that did not reflect my culture. So I think there's a lot of potential in any sort of design on fabric that can be worn. Yeah, I hope this answers your question.
Great. Okay, Jumana, I think you're going to be the last question. I don't know if we'll have time. If we do, we'll add some more. Jumana, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Bahia, I wanted to ask you about your graffiti work that I've been following on Instagram. If anybody doesn't know it, on your Instagram account, they're really nice. And I was wondering how you choose your quotes, your designs, and the relations to the cities where they're happening. And thanks, and mwah, and hi, Huda.
I meet you. This is so wonderful. This is the best last question. Very quickly, it's a very big question, but at the corner of a dream, the book highlights all these narratives, but it's, for example, one of my favorites is the one I painted in Hawaii, because I painted a poem they're all poems by Mahmoud Darwish. And then we can talk later why Mahmoud Darwish and not other poets. When I discovered that in Hawaii, they were able to revive their language in spite of colonization, to me, that was the ultimate act of defiance. So I painted سيرجع شعبي هواء وضوءا وماء. My people will return as air and light and water. So my selection of the poem in the different cities is sometimes has to do with the political context or the history of that city, or what I feel at the time we need a message. For example, I painted in Paris only one word, I will dream, سأحلم, or سنكون يوم. So it's always poems that I feel like right now in history, this is what I want to say to myself and to my community. And so I paint them in that city very quickly.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. But here, I'm going to leave you with one final question. If you were to recommend any books aside from the books that you've been involved with, the ones that were on your shelf to begin with, for people to check out, what are some that come to mind? People who are interested in the history of design in the region, or maybe history of design in other regions that may help inform the way we think about.
I'm going to be biased and say anything by the Khat Foundation. Go to their website and order anything from there, because I think it's a brilliant library. What Khat Foundation has been doing is fascinating, and it is one of the best places to find references. Also on Type Lab, it's a platform that I founded. It's a research space that I founded 2 years ago. So Type Lab, we are featuring a series where we highlight all the books that are related to Arabic typography and calligraphy. Some of them also anything related to Arab design. We have a very long list of books that we are posting every day there. So you can also check that out for inspiration or references.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody, I added a feedback link. It's simply one question. Was this good? Please answer that question. Give us feedback on how today's talk was. If you're interested in supporting Afikra's work and keeping these events free and open to all, allowing us to do this work and help us engage in this knowledge production, please consider joining the hundreds of supporters around the world who make this work possible. The link is, I'll put it in the chat as well. And this weekend, we don't have any events, but next week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we have events. Tuesday, we have an event with the team from Visualizing Palestine, who do unbelievably powerful work. I highly recommend that you join. It's going to be a really, really important conversation. Please tell your friends about it. Anyone who's interested in understanding what's happening on the ground and how to educate yourself. Okay, everybody, have a nice day, night, wherever you are. Bahia, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a real thrill.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for hosting me, and thank you, everyone. It has been so amazing seeing old friends and everybody from all over the world. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.